I did not expect her to scold my wolf. Most people who encountered Kale in the outer courtyard of Varnhold took one look at the size of him, the gray-silver coat, the amber eyes, the quiet, deliberate way he moved, as though he had already decided the outcome of everything, and went very still. Some backed against the nearest wall. One visiting count had fainted. Kale had observed the count on the ground with the expression he usually reserved for things he found beneath his attention, and then he had walked back inside without me. He was not a wolf who made friends. He had not, in 11 years, shown the slightest interest in any of the noblewomen my council had paraded before me, which was my private relief and my council's open despair. He had not shown interest in my steward, my guard captains, or the half-dozen candidates I had allowed into the hold's inner courtyard, specifically so that Kale could assess them, and I could see what he made of them. He made nothing of them. He looked at them the way he looked at furniture that had been placed in the wrong room. Then he found the bread woman. Her name, I learned from my steward on the second morning, was Pira. She had set up a flatbread stall in the hold's outer market, one of a dozen vendors who rotated through the cobblestone courtyard on autumn market days when the apple harvest traders came down from the northern farms. She had been selling there 3 seasons. She was not pack-affiliated. She was not from Varnhold originally. She had come from a smaller settlement 2 days' ride east, and she had no rank, no family name of standing, and apparently no fear whatsoever of large wolves. Kale had discovered her on the first morning of that market week. I had been watching from the upper walk above the courtyard. It was my habit to observe the market from there, a king's form of eavesdropping on his own hold's life, and I had seen Kale slip through the outer gate with the particular unhurried confidence of a wolf who had already decided something. He had walked directly to Pira's stall. She had been arranging her tray, round flatbreads, still warm, stacked in careful rows, and she had not looked up until Kale was approximately 3 feet from her and already selecting. He had taken one bread with a precision that suggested he had thought about it for some time, and turned to leave. "Oh, absolutely not," Pira had said. I had stopped walking. She had come around the side of her stall, hands on her hips, and addressed my wolf as though he were a market-day pickpocket. "Put it back or pay for it, same as everyone else. I don't care how big you are." Kale had looked at her. It was the look he gave to things he was reconsidering. Pira had held out her hand. There was a long moment. I had gripped the railing of the upper walk without realizing it. Kale had set the bread back on her tray, turned around, and walked back through the gate with an air of someone who had simply decided this transaction was beneath him. Pira had watched him go, muttered something under her breath. I was too far to hear it, but the word dignity was somewhere in there, and gone back to arranging her tray. I stood on the upper walk for rather longer than necessary after that. He went back the second morning. This time he took 2 breads and was gone before she turned around. I heard her from the upper walk. "That gray wolf again. Someone in this hold needs to leash their animal." She said it to no one in particular, but loudly enough that 2 passing hold servants winced and walked faster. I watched her scan the courtyard for the culprit and find nothing. I should have sent a guard down. I should have had Kale brought back and the bread paid for from the hold's household accounts, as was proper. I had the coin. It would have taken 30 seconds. I did not do that. I told myself I was curious to see what he was doing. Kale had not shown active interest in anything outside of pack business and occasional birds for 3 years. I watched him with the attention I gave to matters that might, eventually, mean something. That was what I told myself. The third morning, Kale came back again and sat directly in front of her stall and waited. Pira looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked around, clearly trying to determine who this animal belonged to and why no one was stopping him. Then she looked back at Kale. "I know what you're doing," she said. Kale waited. "You're waiting for me to feel sorry for you," she crossed her arms. "It won't work. I've got 3 brothers. I know exactly how this goes. Kale put his chin on the edge of her stall table. There was a pause. That's a good trick, Pyrrha said. I'll give you that. She picked up a bread and held it out, and Kale took it with a delicacy that I had genuinely never seen him use before, as though he was demonstrating that he was capable of it and had simply not been motivated to show anyone until now. Pyrrha watched him eat it. Shameless thief with no dignity, she said, but her voice had changed. She scratched behind his left ear and he went still in the way he only went still when something mattered. I realized, standing on the upper walk in the cold autumn morning, that I was smiling. I could not remember the last time I had smiled at something simply because it was happening in front of me and it pleased me. Not a smile for the benefit of a council session, not the controlled expression of a king acknowledging good news. Just a smile. Because a flatbread seller was scolding my wolf for theft and he was letting her, and something about it struck me as so purely right that I had no other response. I went back inside and said nothing to anyone. Kale returned on the 4th morning, and I followed him. Not obviously I was not, whatever wreath my steward would later claim, skulking. I took the ground-level passage through the hold's eastern wing that led out near the outer courtyard's edge, and I stood in the shadow of the archway with my arms crossed, wearing no crown, and watched. Kale went directly to Pyrrha's stall. He did not steal anything. He sat down. She looked at him, looked at her tray, took out a bread, and handed it to him without being asked. There, she said, now you're a paying customer, sort of. She pointed at him. I'm calling this credit. You owe me one wolf. Kale ate the bread. He looked up at her with the amber eyes that, in my experience, made grown warriors uncomfortable, and Pyrrha reached out and tugged his ear gently. You're all right, she told him, despite yourself. I must have made some sound, or moved. Or perhaps Kale simply decided the moment had arrived. Kale had always had a sense of when a situation needed advancing, because he looked past Pyrrha at me, directly, with a steadiness that said he had known I was there all along. Pyrrha turned. She saw a man in plain dark clothes, no insignia, standing in a courtyard archway watching her market stall. She gave me the same look she had given Kale on the first morning. Assessing, not intimidated. Is this your wolf? She said. Yes, I said. Good, you owe me 3 breads. I reached into my coat for coin. She named a price fair, not inflated, the sort of price that told me she was not the kind of person who adjusted her rates for people she was annoyed at, and I paid it. Kale watched this transaction with an expression I can only describe as satisfied. He's been at my stall every morning this week, Pyrrha said. She was not accusing. She was establishing facts, the way a person does when they want the facts to be clear before anything else happens. I don't mind the company, but he takes up the whole front of the stall and some customers are afraid of him. I'll keep him inside, I said. I didn't say to keep him inside. She frowned at me, a small, precise frown. I said some customers are afraid of him. You could put a sign up. Friendly wolf won't bite, does steal bread, has been spoken to about it. I looked at her for a moment. Then I looked at Kale, who was looking at nothing in particular, which was how he looked when he was enjoying himself. Then I looked back at Pyrrha. I'll consider the sign, I said. She nodded, as though this was a reasonable conclusion to a reasonable conversation, and turned back to her stall. I stood there for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. Then I went back inside through the eastern passage, and I stood in my own study for a while doing nothing much, and I thought about what it meant that I had stood in an archway paying for stolen bread and been entirely at ease with the whole of it. My counsel would not have recognized me. I was not certain I recognized myself. The 5th morning, Kale did not go to the market stall. He went there and came back, and then went to stand outside my study door and looked at me until I stood up. What? I said. He walked toward the hold's great hall. I followed him, because in 11 years I had learned that when Kale wanted to show me something, The correct response was to go and look at it. He had, over the years, shown me a collapsed section of the eastern wall before I'd known it needed repair, a fever moving through the southern wolf pens before my healers had spotted it, and once memorably, a letter in my own steward's handwriting that my steward had not yet decided to show me. Cale had his own system of priorities. They were generally correct. He walked through the great hall's side passage to the outer market gate, and he picked up the leather strap of Pyrrha's empty bread tray, left leaning against the wall, presumably forgotten or set down while she handled something, and he carried it into the great hall. I watched him do this. "Cale," I said. He set the tray down in the center of the great hall floor, right over the old blood bond seal. Then he sat beside it and looked at the doorway. I had not thought about the blood bond seal in years. It was set into the floor of Varnhold's great hall, a circle of interlocked carved stone approximately 4 feet across. At the center of the room, old work, older than the hall itself, older than the hold in its current form. The stories held that it had been placed there by the first alpha of Varnhold's line, that it would recognize his true mate's bloodline in any of his heirs, that it would blaze gold when the right person walked across it. My father had believed this. His father had believed it. I had grown up believing it in the abstract way one believes in things that are, practically speaking, not going to affect one's life. It had been dark for as long as anyone currently living could remember. I looked at the seal, and I looked at Cale sitting beside Pyrrha's bread tray, and I became aware that my counsel was filing into the hall for the morning session, and that I was standing in the middle of the room looking at the floor. "Your Grace," said Reth. "Counsel can wait," I said. "Something is happening." Reth opened his mouth. Then he heard the sound from the outer courtyard, Pyrrha's voice, clear and carrying, saying, "I left it right here. I left it against the wall. Someone has taken my..." Followed by her appearing in the doorway with the expression of a woman who had, through no desire of her own, followed a trail of stolen property into someone's rather large hall. She stopped. She took in the hall. The high stone ceiling, the banners, the long council tables, the row of senior officials who had turned to look at her, and Cale sitting in the middle of the floor beside her tray. "There it is," she said. She walked into the hall. The council watched her. I watched the seal. She was 3 steps into the room when it happened. The floor beneath her foot lit gold, not slowly, not uncertainly, but with the confidence of something that had been waiting 100 years, and had simply been waiting for the right person to walk into the room. The circle blazed from stone to gold in a single breath, spreading outward from the center, the way light spreads when you bring a candle into a dark space, and the carved lines of it came up warm and unmistakable through the stone. Pyrrha looked down. She looked at the glowing floor. Then she looked up at me, at the council, at Reth, at Cale, who was looking at nothing at all and conveying absolute innocence. "Is this," she said carefully, "something you do to everyone who follows your wolf inside, or is it specific to me?" "Specific to you," I said. A beat of silence. "What does it mean?" she asked. I walked toward her because this was the kind of conversation that should not be conducted across a room. My counsel was very still. Reth had gone white. The seal was still glowing, warm and steady, as though it had no intention of going anywhere. "It is a bonding seal," I said. "Old work. It recognizes the bloodline of the Alpha King's fated mate." I stopped in front of her. "It has been dark for longer than anyone living has been keeping records." Pyrrha looked at me for a long moment. She was not afraid. She was thinking. "And you are the Alpha King," she said. "Yes. The one who owes me for 3 mornings of bread." "I paid for 3 mornings," I said. "You paid for the ones I told you about," she said. There was a pause. Somewhere behind me I heard Reth make a sound. I kept my eyes on Pyrrha. The seal glowed between us, gold on gray stone, unhurried and certain. "How many mornings were there total?" I said. 6, she said. Your wolf is creative. He waited until I was busy with other customers on the last two. I looked over my shoulder at Kale. Kale looked away. He will be spoken to, I said. I'd like payment first, Pyrrha said. And then you can explain what a fated mate is, and why it's apparently relevant to me, and what I'm supposed to do about a glowing floor. She was direct. She was more direct than anyone had been with me in years. My counsel negotiated every sentence. My steward weighed every word before he said it. My guard captains were perfectly trained and perfectly careful. No one simply stated what they needed from me in the order they needed it, without preamble, without softening. It was, I understood as I stood there, one of the better things I had heard in a decade of sitting in that hall. Sit down, I said. I'll explain everything, and I'll have Reth bring bread. I've got my own bread, she said, picking up her tray from beside Kale. Of course you do, I said. We sat at the far end of the council table, Pyrrha with her tray of flatbread between us and Kale lying under the table between our feet, and I told her what the seal meant and what the bond was and what had happened every morning for the past week, and why my wolf had done what he had done. I told her none of it was an obligation. I told her the bond was unmistakable, but that it was not a command, that it was a recognition, not a requirement, that she could leave Varnhold and the seal would remember her and the choice would still be hers. She listened to all of this without interrupting, which told me she was thinking carefully. She ate bread. She gave Kale a piece, which he accepted as his due. When I finished, she said, "Can I keep my stall?" "Yes," I said. "And my own rooms, to start." She looked at me with the practical clarity of someone organizing a complicated problem. I don't know you. I know your wolf, the wolf I trust. You I've spoken to 3 times, 2 of which were about bread theft." "That is fair," I said. "Yes. Your own rooms, for as long as you need them. And the wolf gets an official bread ration, so he stops stealing." "I will have it written into the household ledger," I said. She considered this for a long moment. The seal had settled from its initial blaze to quieter gold, still lit, still certain, but steady now, the way a hearth is steady rather than the way a fire newly caught is sudden. The council had, with the finely honed survival instinct of people who could read a room, quietly dispersed. Reth had found somewhere to be. It was only the 2 of us and Kale and the warm stone light. "All right," Pyrrha said. "I'll stay for now and we'll see." "That's all I'm asking," I said. She looked at me with eyes that were direct and warm, and, underneath the practicality, curious. The way someone looks when they have already decided something but want to take their time arriving at it properly. "You laughed earlier," she said, "when I asked about the bread." "I did," I said. "You looked like you weren't expecting to," she said. I was quiet for a moment. The hall was still around us, autumn light coming through the high windows, the seal glowing softly in the floor. 11 years of council sessions and quiet campaigns, and the careful management of a hold that needed its king to be strong and steady and perpetually composed. 11 years without anything that surprised me pleasantly. "I wasn't," I said. "No." She nodded, as though this confirmed something she had been working out. She did not press it. She stood, picked up her tray, and looked down at Kale. "Come on then, I've got half a market morning left." Kale stood immediately and walked to heel at her left side, which he had never, in 11 years, done for anyone. I watched them go. I sat in the empty hall for a while afterward, in the warmth of the seal and the autumn light, and I thought about what it means to be found by something you had stopped looking for. You don't look for it. You forget it might exist. You arrange your life around its absence with great care and competence, until one morning a gray wolf decides he likes the flatbread seller in the outer market, and fate, which has been patient, takes that as its opening. The bonding ceremony was 3 weeks later. It was quiet. Pyrrha had been clear on this, and I had agreed, because she was right that a large ceremony would have been for the court's benefit and not ours. We stood in the great hall, just us and Reth and 2 witnesses from her own choosing, and we made the formal declaration before the seal, which blazed gold again for a moment and then settled back to its quiet, steady warmth, as though satisfied. Cale sat between us. He had been given a bread ration written into the hold's official accounts and sealed with my signet ring, and he was, as far as I could tell, entirely content with himself. "I want it on record," Pyrrha said afterward, looking at Reth, "that this wolf is the architect of this entire situation." "Noted, my lady," said Reth, who had recovered his composure and was writing in his ledger with the focused attention of a man who understood that history was happening and intended to record it accurately. "Good," she said. She looked at Cale. "Don't think this means I'll stop telling you off when you steal things." Cale looked at her with the amber eyes and the mild expression of a wolf who knew exactly where he stood in the order of things and was perfectly satisfied with it. She scratched his ear. The court adjusted over the following months in the way courts do. They watched their king, and they saw that he was present in a way he had not been before, attentive to things he had let slide, quicker to laugh at the council table, less like a man managing his life and more like a man living it. The bread stall ran through the end of the autumn market season, and Pyrrha closed it herself when she was ready, on her own schedule, without being asked to. She kept her own rooms until she didn't want them anymore, and that too was on her own schedule. What I know is this: she learned the names of every wolf in the hold within the first month, before she learned half the council's names. She told me this herself, unapologetically. She said the wolves were more honest. I could not argue with it. And on the first morning of winter, when the market was long done, and the cobblestones of the outer courtyard were white with the first frost, Pyrrha found me at the upper walk railing, my old watching place, the spot where I had first seen her argue with my wolf, and she stood beside me and looked down at the quiet courtyard below. "Is this where you watched from?" she said. "Every morning that week," I said. She leaned on the railing. After a moment, "He planned it, didn't he, the whole thing?" I looked at Cale, who was in the courtyard below us, lying in a patch of thin winter sun with the specific boneless contentment of a wolf who had orchestrated things to his satisfaction. "Almost certainly," I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at me sideways, and there was something in her expression that was warm and amused and entirely hers. A look I was coming to know, the look she had when she found something genuinely good. "Smart wolf," she said. She reached over and took my hand. Just like that, practical, direct, as though it were the obvious thing to do and she saw no reason to make ceremony out of it. Below us, Cale did not look up. He had the bread ration he had been promised. He had arranged everything else precisely as he intended. He had nothing left to prove.